Today we're going to talk about reflecting quadratic functions. And just a reminder that a quadratic function is a U-shaped curve here. It's also known as a parabola sometimes. And we're going to reflect across the x-axis and the y-axis. And although the general ideas apply to all types of functions, the first exercise gets at both of these important transformations. So we're going to start by graphing y equals negative the quantity of x squared in our calculator, and then we're going to sketch it to the right. What we have in our picture is we have the parent function. So we're going to go to y equals, and then we're going to type in negative x squared. And what we see here when we hit the graph is this picture. If we want a little bit more details, we're going to go to second and table, and let's scroll a little bit and get a few more values here, and those are the values that I'm going to graph. Which are 1, -1, 2, -4, 3, -9, -1, -1, -2, -4, and 3, -9. Hopefully your picture is better than mine. As we sketch that here, it says what seems to be the transformation from the graph. Well, I'm going to use a hand gesture here, and what happens is we seem to flip this graph over the x-axis. And it's a reminder here that this is the x-axis and this is the y. And flipping is also known as reflecting the graph over the x-axis. So you can probably guess what's going to happen here when we go back to our calculator. I'm going to go back to y equals. I'm going to clear that out. And this time we're going to type in negative x squared. We're going to look at our picture. So I'm going to hit graph. And if we want a few more details here, we can go to second and table, and we get this picture. And what you might notice here is that we have -3, 9, -2, 4, -1, 1, and so forth. And you've got to be able to see the picture here. Try that one more time. But I said -3, 9, -2, 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, and so forth. This is the picture that we have on our screen. It's already drawn on there, but in fact, there is a transformation, but we cannot see any transformations. We can't see the transformation. So I picked a different graph here, one that we will study more in depth later, but we're going to look at the square root function. And so we're going to go back to y equals, and let's type in our first value here, negative the square root of x. Negative, remember negative is at the bottom of your screen, square root of x. And here comes the picture. And we want a few more details here, so we can go and we can look at our table. And notice that we've got some errors over there in the negative, because when we look at our graph, we don't have anything graphed over here in the negative section. But I can scroll through here. And let's just graph a couple of nicer points, like 0, 0, which is already on our graph. And then 1, -1. 4, -2, and if I continue to scroll down, we have 9, -3. So here is this, and what happens is we flipped. Flipping is also known as reflecting over the x-axis. So now, what happens when we put the negative inside of our function? So if we go back to our y equals, and I'm just going to delete that sign, and then I'm going to type in negative x underneath the square root, and then we're going to hit graph. Let's see what the picture looks like. Oh, and we can see something on here. We want a few more details, so we can hit second and graph. That gets us to the table, and I need to scroll until I can see some values here. And what happens here as we look at our screen, and we can scroll through more, is we have some values. Let's stick with the whole number graphs, like 0, 0, negative 1, 1, negative 4, 2, and negative 9, 3. There's our picture. A reminder that this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. And what happens when we take the square root of negative x, or the negative is inside the function, then what's going to happen is we're going to flip. Better word is reflect over the y-axis. And that is really what happens on this particular graph. It's just that we can't see it. This part of the graph lands over here, and this part of the graph lands over here. So it looks exactly like the picture. We can't see the transformation, which is why we had to do the square root function. But in terms of what we're going to be filling in on our table here, here's a summary. If the negative is outside of the function, then we reflect the graph over the x-axis. And if the negative is inside of the function, then we're going to reflect it over the y-axis.